Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. My name is Thomas Johnson. I don't know if my mic is on. Can everyone hear me? The mic? Oh. How about now? How about now? How about now? How about now? Yeah, that works. Great. So as mentioned, my name is Thomas Johnson. I'm the curator of Performance and Moving Image here at RPL Film Theatre. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here. Occasionally the mic might go. Hopefully I can project okay. Okay, one last try. You're good. Okay, is mine good? Okay. All right, you know who I am. I'm here on Oxcana Kasatake, also known as Pilot Bones, also known as Regina, and on Treaty 4 territory, the home of the Nehewak, the Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota nations, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And it's my great pleasure to have you here for this event, which was SWANA 2022, curated by Christina Hajjar. And today we'll have her in discussion with Zarqa Nawaz, also tomorrow after our next screening at 3 p.m. Following this discussion, we invite you to ask questions, and for our online guests, please include those in the chat. And now it's my pleasure to welcome our two guests. Christina Hajjar is a Lebanese artist, writer, and cultural worker based in Winnipeg, Manitoba, on Treaty 1 territory. Her practice considers intergenerational inheritance, domesticity, and place through diaspora, body archives, and cultural iconography. As a queer femme and first-generation subject, she is invested in the poetics of process, translation, and collaborative labor. Hajjar presented the first SWANA Film Festival in 2021. Also joining us is Zarqa Nawaz, who is a Canadian film and television producer, public speaker, journalist, and former broadcaster. She's the author of the memoir Laughing All the Way to the Mosque, which was shortlisted for the Leacock Medal for Humour, the Kobo Emerging Writer Prize, and 2 Saskatchewan Book Awards. She also created the hit CBC comedy series Little Mosque on the Prairie, the world's first sitcom about a Muslim community living in the West, and is the creator and star of the forthcoming series Zarqa. Her new novel, which you can purchase outside of the space here, Jameela Green Ruins Everything, was published in March of 2022. Zarqa lives in Regina, Saskatchewan, with her loving but long-suffering family. A few thank yous, including to everyone here who's enjoyed this screening so far, to Penny University, who's selling the publications, to Afghan Kitchen, who supplied a wonderful meal, Blair Forwall, Neutral Ground, who are hosting Christina's exhibition, and which opens tomorrow night. I encourage you all to attend. Vukavu, where some of the audience is viewing this work, and also to all the filmmakers who were part of this screening. So thank you, and I'd now like to invite Zarqa and Christina for conversation.
How was everyone? The food was amazing. I think, as Thomas was saying, it's a big surprise for library guests to get food in a screening here, but it was Ramadan, so I made him feed me. And I'm very grateful because the 2 films fell right when the sun set, so I was like, oh, we're going to be hungry. It was very, very thoughtful. So this is my second time seeing these films, Christine, and Christina. And each time I get something new from it. And you've spent a long time curating these films. Do you find that every viewing teaches you something different from before? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. Well, first, thanks for being here. I was just telling Thomas actually during the break that every time I watch the films, I get something new out of it. And I feel like actually it was like even more emotional for me today because now that like I got to just exhale and actually just take in the films rather than like, you know, being in this like chaotic planning energy, it felt like even more emotional. And so I was kind of surprised about that reaction within myself. But of course, like there's so many unanswered questions still with these films that I have yet to answer. I don't know if the filmmakers would be up for a Q&A in a future year. That would be a goal of mine as well, so that I can pick their brains about it. Yeah.
Let's talk about the first film with Mira and her sister. What was the theme in that film for yourself?
Family drama. So Tallahassee is a screenplay written by Hala Alian, who's a poet that I really admire. And so like I really just connected with like her broodiness in the film. And I think that all three films are coming of age stories, but that one specifically spoke to me because of like the different family relationships at play. So the sibling relationship and the tensions there of like wanting closeness, but also like having that disconnection that they can't reach across. And then, of course, like the intergenerational relationships as well, Teta, the grandma, and then the little boy. So I think it's about intergenerational relationships, and then it's also about like, I guess like feeling alone too, because that's like Mira, the main character's like experience is like navigating these relationships, but also feeling super, you know, pensive, broody, emotional, maybe alone. Yeah.
And what was interesting to me was the little boy. What do you think he represented?
I guess like he's definitely there from the beginning as this like obviously like a childlike innocence. He's not really he obviously doesn't understand like the family drama that's happening on a deeper level. He clearly picks up on it in some ways, but he's also like super invested in his own world, which is his art project. And so I think his presence in the film was really interesting, and the ways that Mira gravitated towards him as a kind of refuge from like the rest of the family event that was happening. So I guess he symbolizes hope in a way, or innocence. And then like there's his actual project, which is like the Dream Factory, which I think is really interesting as well. And like Mira is definitely like humors him, or not humors him, like she actually is into it, I think. But that's noteworthy because like not everybody takes kids seriously, and like especially we see his mom in that scene is kind of like, oh, he's making a dream catcher. The teachers told him to invent something, and it's like, okay, well, dream catchers are actually very much a thing. And the child corrects her and says, I'm making a dream factory, and it's like his own thing. And yeah, I think the fact that she becomes invested in him and his art project is not just as a form of escapism from the family drama, but I think it's like some emotional connection that she's feeling with him.
And I feel the film ended on a very hopeful note.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, she cuts off the bracelet, and I guess one thing I picked up on today was like the balloon imagery and how that differs from scene to scene. And like when they leave the oyster shop, like it gets stuck in the trees, but then in the final scene, it's kind of like wrapped in the bench, but less so in a stuck way, but more like maybe they left it there or something. So I guess there's definitely some symbolism there. But yeah, I think it seems that she gains a sense of peace, even if just a small amount. She kind of exhales, like cuts it off, examines it, and is like looking side to side. So she's reflecting on something, and yeah, she's still very much her own person. Like she learned a lesson of like not taking the kid out, but I don't think that's like a big deal. Yeah.
Speaking of coming of age, the second film was really powerful. A little boy who learns some deep, dark secrets about his family.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I found it, we had discussed this together, that it was a little ambiguous as to how all this land has been inherited by his family.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't really know the details except for that his grandfather saying that this other man, Al Masood, like owned all of it, and now 2/3 of it belongs to him. And he's saying he said that the man like sold some of the land every time he was married, which like I'm not really sure about like why or how that happened, but I'm really interested in like little boy's reaction to that and how like there's a quite literal like rejection of that family inheritance because he like willfully makes himself throw up and rejects his grandfather by running away from him. So yeah, I think there's a rebelliousness in all of the main characters in these films tonight, which is what I love.
Yeah, no, he seems to be reacting to an injustice.
Yes. Yeah, he senses that there's something not right about it. And even in the opening scene, he's watching like the other community members like make fun of this man, like who's leading who. They kind of open to that scene and make us realize that people don't really take this man seriously. And then he hears like how his grandfather is speaking about him, and then he also learned about like the feelings of the trees. That was something kind of new that I picked up on today. Like I wonder about what was going on for him. If maybe there was like some affinity with the land as well in how he was reacting to this new information that he gained. And yeah, he's very, very pensive. Like we see him like taking this in, and he's so young, but he knows that this feels off.
And I found the third film a revelation because I did not know that there were Palestinian dystopian futuristic films being made. Like that was quite interesting.
Yeah, Larissa Sansur and Soren Lind made this film, which is actually on Netflix now also. It was added a few months ago with a whole host of Palestinian films. And I can't say that I'm too knowledgeable about like the genre of like sci-fi Palestinian films. I don't know how big it is, but I know that Larissa Sansur has other films as well in this genre. And if I'm not mistaken, In Vitro, and I think all of the other films shown tonight are on their way to becoming feature-length films too. So I'm really excited because In Vitro is like one of my favorites. I love that like slow, broody energy that it brings. Yeah.
Tell me more about the young character in the film and what she is complaining about to the older character.
What she's complaining about?
Yeah.
I guess she's complaining about inheritance and the role of memory and the role of place. She has been planted with the memories of her past or the memories of these scientists' past and the archives that they've built and preserved. So I think their tension is like this back and forth of questioning the role of history and the role of nostalgia, because the younger character seems a bit resentful or cynical about feeling this grief and inheriting inheriting the grief of this loss that she hasn't experienced. And then also like carrying the burden of like carrying on the next generation, because they're saying that other people before her have died, and she's like one of the only test subjects that made it this far. So obviously there's must be pressure involved with like the preciousness of surviving, but also like she is like a science experiment in a way. So yeah, but I think there's like real parallels and themes to carry forward even without like that sci-fi context, just like the themes of intergenerational inheritance and exile. So
And can you talk to us about your curatorial statement when you put these films together?
yeah. So I was thinking about the relationship between lovesickness and homesickness, and how family space and family relationships are disrupted in face of displacement and diaspora. And so, yeah, I was thinking about basically like how the emotional responses to diaspora and displacement and how those play out in family relationships, and how lovesickness informs homesickness and homesickness informs lovesickness. And when I say lovesickness, I mean any sort of love. Like usually when we think of lovesickness, we think of like romantic heartbreak. But I'm thinking about the lovesickness that, for example, Mira faces, of the fact that she has this like unstable relationship with her family and can't even bring her full self because there are unconsensual lies being told about her. And in a Q&A actually with Doreen Hotate, which is the director of Tallahassee, and Hala Alian, who plays Mira, and she's the writer of the film. They were talking about how, although it's not explicit in the film, this is also a story of Palestinian exile and all the ways in which diaspora and displacement and exile affect mental health. And so while that film is about like how mental illness or substance use is like taboo, obviously we can infer that this is an Arab family, and this family has been impacted by other events, other histories of violence and things that are in the background that are kind of implied.
Amazing. I wanted to open it up to our audience. Does anyone had questions for us?
I have a question. I'd love to hear a bit more about your film programming and curation's relationship to place and time. And in the 3 works that we saw today, we went from somewhere in the States to somewhere in Sudan to a speculative diasporic dystopia. And the way that you move through time and space in that way just seems so, it's just so diasporic.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'd just love to hear a bit more about how you think through place and the sort of unflattening of place when it comes to diaspora.
Yes, good question. I guess when I'm picking films to program together, I'm more so thinking about like the emotional landscape of the films, and I think that comes first. When I like this is only my second year curating the SWANA Film Festival. And so when I was curating last year's and this year's, it was really important for me to have films from both the SWANA region and the diaspora. And my subject position as a diasporic Lebanese person obviously limits my understanding and experience of people who actually live in the SWANA region. But I think that's why it's also important to include those films, is that there are inevitable relationships throughout these films, regardless of place. And yeah, I think when I think of diaspora, it's so characterized by this sense of disorientation. And so I am interested in kind of like tugging at the audience's like attention and disorienting like a sense of place. Like instead of creating like a clean like narrative of these are films from this region and they look like this. Like there are so many types of filmmaking that I'm still not even aware of. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think my answer has something to do with disorientation and how the feeling of being in diaspora is so much about disorientation, feeling like connected to a place that's not even physically here, but doing so through different forms of ritual, of preserving memory, and yeah, something about that. What do you think?
I was just taken by how you took us from the US and then to Sudan and then to Palestine. And even my son was saying he found the Sudanese film engaging because he'd never seen Sudan before, to be able to see a child's relationship with the land. And you know, because we're Muslim and it's Ramadan, to see how they were doing wudu. And I was like, you know, because like exactly what you're saying, even though I was born and raised in the West, I share a faith with that little boy in Sudan and those rituals. And I'm like, you know, that's part of my traditions. And so it was amazing to just suddenly be transported to another place through this little boy. And I was like, wow, like, you know, doing wudu, I'd done wudu before I came here, and I was watching another person doing it a different way. And, you know, that connection, you feel this connection to someone far away from you.
Yeah.
And you're like, we share something in this film, even though it's, you know, so far away.
Yeah. And I've heard other people, like, for example, at another screening that I was at that was showing a Palestinian film, this friend that I had was completely moved because it was a short film from their homeland that they have never been able to visit. And so, like, that's absolutely wild to be able to access it in that way. So I think that in that way, films are very, very important archives as well. Even if they're like fiction films, just to be able to experience the landscape is huge. Yeah. And then the other thing too about like the final film, In Vitro, is I think what I also love about it is that I guess in some ways I'm like making fun of myself because like I am so like I definitely like lean into those themes of nostalgia and diasporic romanticism, but then I'm also very, very aware of the need to bring a criticality to that. And so I like that film because the young character is saying like our culture is just reduced, or these memories are just reduced to symbols and iconography. And so like that's like my whole arts practice is like loving that. But then there's this tension of like how that's not enough, or in that situation specifically, like she's saying, this isn't my past, this isn't my story, and yet I feel it. And so I think that's relatable to me as well as a first generation Canadian, because while I have never been to Lebanon, I inherit my mom's stories of war and just that tension of taking on those stories, but then like where is the boundary of like our experiences, you know? And in that situation, the young woman feels like kind of resentful, but of course there's like a whole host of emotions associated with like intergenerational knowledge and intergenerational trauma. Yeah.
And there was amazing use of archival footage in Palestine in that film, in vitro.
I'm not sure. I actually don't know how much of it could all have been shot like recently and then just made to look archival.
Really? Okay.
I actually don't know what is archival and what is new. I think we're looking at a nice like high budget film there, so who knows?
I think tomorrow's films have more archival footage.
Yes, yeah. Tomorrow's films are a lot more about filmmakers, like kind of recycling archival footage, family home videos, and remaking them into a new archive. So, yeah, I'm not sure about in vitro. I'm definitely curious. And yeah, there's definitely some, there are scenes where like the military is coming in, and there are scenes of like different places of worship, and I'm very curious like what has been staged and what but maybe that's part of it too. It's like we don't know.
Very true. Are there any more questions? Well, this has been amazing.
Thank you. I feel like I should ask you a question.
Just when I thought I was off the hook. Sure.
Like, yeah, how do you relate to these films as a cultural producer yourself?
That's a really good question. I watched them as a comedy writer, so this is very different for me. And so the one that I could relate to the most was the first one because it had a strong narrative element to it. And so I watched it with great interest, both the first and second time around, to understand what the filmmaker was trying to, the story the filmmaker was trying to tell, and whether I felt satisfied by the ending. And I kept thinking to myself, would I have done it differently? Did I feel that the writer had resolved her issues enough for me to believe it? And I was trying to sort out my emotions, like how much had this character suffered? You know, she was clearly going through sort of a redemptive process and recovery, and I was trying to gauge how much I believed she would have recovered from that process, because it seemed to me when she cut the bracelet, she seemed to have come full circle. And so as a writer, I was trying to determine critically, on a critical level, if they had done enough work in the writing to earn that redemption. And so I was sitting there trying to figure that out. I was like, do I believe this? Could she have done more, or do I need more information in the background? And the same thing with the date. I was trying to sort out, like, what did we lose in translation? Like, if we had understood the original language, would we have understood more of what happened with the little boy? And the last one was, for me, because it was more experimental, I got more out of it the second time because I was picking up on some of the things she was saying, and sort of the resentment of the character. And I kept thinking, this is symbolic to what is actually happening in Palestine, and what are the messages that she's trying to teach us. But I have to say that I'm not as deep a thinker. When you're a comedy writer, you tend to be a bit more superficial. So I was like, I will ask Christina what this was about.
No, that's a good question. Tallahassee does feel like a bit of a happy ending, or there's at least that closure for us because the bracelet is cut. I know that they are working on the feature-length film
they? Okay.
version of that film. So I'm curious to see what other stories will unfold. But yeah, I think maybe maybe she's hasn't maybe we didn't earn that moment, but it was just imposed on her through the mere suggestion of the scissors being handed to her. Because the child did notice the bracelet, asked about it, and remembered it, which is curious. So yeah, maybe she's not like as far along as like um, that gesture is supposed to be like that she's healed, but maybe it was just following his lead in that moment.
And I would be really interested to see the feature of the second film because I feel like there's a lot of unresolved issues.
For sure. Like, did he get in trouble after? Yeah.
No, I would be really interested to see the features based on all three. I can see why each of them could be a feature because I feel like there's so much unresolved story elements
Mhm.
that you want a longer form.
Yeah.
It's hard to put a lot of story in a shorter form.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's why I'm attracted to short films as well. Like, it's not necessarily about understanding the full context, but it's just kind of this immersive experience, just like jumping into a small moment or riding this like wave of emotion and just letting that be it. Like being okay with like not knowing the full context. And so for that reason, I'm like, yeah, I could like email the filmmakers like all the unresolved questions that I have, but maybe I'll just take it for what it is as well, and that is like the artwork that they chose to share. So yeah.
And did everyone notice the very famous actor in Vitro? She played the mother in Rami and the wife in Succession.
Yeah, she's so cool. That's epic that she's in that. And also in Vitro is very special because like of the 2 channel, I'm very, very attracted to it visually. And I know that it's considered a film, what do they call it? Moving image? I don't know. There's so many different classifications, but it is definitely seen as more of an art film in terms of like how it can exist physically. So it goes to a lot of different art shows and exhibitions. I think that just like as an image, as a moving image, like on a wall, you could experience it just walking into a room, seeing it, and walking away. So not everyone experiences that film as a narrative film, but I think I really like watching it from beginning to end. But yeah, just like visually, it could exist as a work on a wall as well.
Amazing. So we will hopefully see everyone tomorrow at 3 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
here to see 5 experimental films.
Yeah, they're much shorter tomorrow. So today's program was an hour. Tomorrow's program will be an hour. Tomorrow we have 1 longer film and 4 shorter films. And the theme for that is experimental archives. So those ones are all experimental films. And I also wanted to just also shout out my own show again. So if you want to spend the whole day with me tomorrow, 3 p.m. we're going to do the second screening of the SWANA Film Festival. And then at 7 p.m. at Neutral Ground Artist Run Center, my solo exhibition called Don't Forget to Count Your Blessings is opening. And then the final plug is also that SWANA Film Festival has partnered with the MENA Film Festival, which is, if you don't know, SWANA and MENA are kind of interchangeable terms to describe Middle East and North Africa. And then so like the the more like decolonial, less Eurocentric acronym has been termed SWANA, Southwest Asia, North Africa. But not a lot of people know about that, so just sharing that with you. So anyway, SWANA Film Festival has partnered with MENA Film Festival, which is based in Vancouver, as well as the Toronto Arab Film Festival, to create a new publication focusing on SWANA film. And right now we have our first call for submissions out, and we've got some little handouts. So the deadline is April 22nd, and if you know any SWANA, the first issue is focusing on SWANA film in Canada.
Excellent. I have a funny story. I didn't know that was the new acronym.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I started watching the film, I'm like, oh no, these are about Muslims. It's Ramadan. I've got to tell poor Thomas and Christina that we may need food.
For sure. Thank you. And Ramadan Mubarak to anyone.
Thank you.
So thank
Yeah.
you for incorporating this into the evening and just making it work together. And hope to see some folks tomorrow. And thank you, Thomas, for the invite. The RPL Film Theatre to do SWANA Film Festival 2022. And thanks all the staff tonight for helping make it happen.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.